Hey, fellow pop culture nerds and affiliates. I'm JD Oliva from Brace for Impact, joined by my friend Jeremy Finestone. Welcome back to Parallel Worlds. We've kind of had this show on ice for a few months, but we kind of thought today would be a good day to kind of bring it back a little bit and talk about the big news in geek culture. That, of course, being James Gunn and Peter Safran finally announced what their plans are for this new DCU, no longer the DCEU, not to be confused with the DCAU, or any of the other multiple tags that DC has to things. And that's part of what their announcement about. We're streamlining, we're focusing the DC universe, the DC cinematic universe, if you will. And after the big that was Black Adam earlier this year, it's time. I didn't hate it as much as everybody else did, but I know it wasn't
fine. It was Scorpion adjacent.
It's very much Scorpion with different superpowers, Scorpion King, if you will. It's time for them to kind of figure out what the hell they're doing, which has been a big problem in the DC universe for quite some time. Is they have 100 years worth of intellectual property, and they had no idea how to truly streamline it and make it good. Right, this is a decade-long problem, and they finally just threw their hands up and said, "All right, you do it," to Peter Safran and James Gunn. And they said, this is what we're going to do. And this is what we're going to talk about. So, Jeremy, thanks for doing this to me today. I sincerely appreciate it. You got huge for a second. Now
I pressed the wrong button at the wrong time. Hi, how are you?
I'm great, man. How are you doing?
I'm great. This has just been a great day in news and just feels like paradigm shifts in wrestling. Just found out Kota Ibushi's gone from New Japan Pro Wrestling. And now we got this major movie news with comics. And honestly, it's great news, right?
It is great news. Yeah.
I'm sitting here and I'm just thinking like, wow, a singular vision defined for the next 8 to 10 years. We had Peter Gunn or James Gunn and Peter Safran, right? They did their 6-minute video today, and they basically laid out their entire vision for the next 8 to 10 years. Pretty fantastic slate of things, kind of imaginative. They have laid out what is now going to be quote unquote Elseworlds among all the infinite Earths that DC has. They've made it clear that all the movies and all the projects they have planned are going to be set on one Earth, one linear timeline, as it will. All the other stuff all exists, and it's all different Earth on the infinite Earth, multiverse, whatever they're calling it in DC nowadays. But we have a slate, we have a plan, I'm very optimistic.
I am too. I feel really good about this. What I really like, and I know we were talking to the boss man, old Double G, about this in our Slack chat earlier, and he's like, it's going to be confusing. And I kind of said, yeah, this is kind of what DC is. And this is the difference between, like, if you're a comics guy, you kind of know DC does one thing and Marvel does another thing. And when the two places try to do what the other one does, it doesn't really work as well, right? DC, for the people who don't know, DC it was never supposed to be one cohesive universe. It was a bunch of things that were kind of hodgepodge together over the course of decades. So, like, Batman and Superman never were supposed to live in the same universe, right? Gotham City and Metropolis are both basically New York, but they got melded together, and then they merged comic companies. So you brought in the original Flash, Green Lantern, all the Justice Society characters, basically. And then in the 50s, they absorbed Fawcett, and then they absorbed Charlton Comics. And what DC would do is they would create these other universes. So you had your infinite Earths. And then in the 90s, they did these things called Elseworlds, which were just basically like continuity-less stories.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Stories you didn't have to read. Like, if you're an X-Men fan, there's a lot of stuff you have to read to know what's going on. And I'm talking about decades worth of material. DC Elseworlds gave you a chance to just, read Kingdom Come. It's a good book. You don't need to know. You have a familiar knowledge of these characters. You can understand the story, right? So that's kind of what an Elseworlds is. And we're keeping that alive in these films with, like, Batman, right? The Batman made a lot of money for Warner Media. One of the few things that made money for Warner Media last year. So
was good.
And was good. And it was good. Yeah. But it doesn't seem like that Batman would fit in a world with a guy who flies from an alien planet.
No.
Right. So why trash that? right? Why trash that? Why not just let that do its own thing? Same with you. We've got this Joker sequel that seems to be a musical set in Arkham Asylum.
I'm gonna pass. I'm personally gonna pass on that one, but I'm
Me
sure there's an audience for it.
There is. People love the
Yes.
Joker. Shockingly, I was not that audience for that first movie. It wasn't for me. But that's okay. Like that, and that's what Elseworlds is. So
Sure.
they're gonna let that do its thing. And what I like about this announcement is that Gunn and Safran said they're gonna streamline this stuff. So, it's gonna be similar to the MCU where TV, video games, and movies are gonna be funneled into the same universe. My question is how, because this sure seems like a soft reboot more than a hard reboot, because it seems like
Yeah.
keeping
100%.
and getting rid of other things, which again, that's what they did in the comics. That's literally what the Crisis on Infinite Earths was, is you got rid of what didn't work and you tried to keep what did work, and it got more confusing as time went along, but I get the idea.
Okay, so I've got nothing to base this on.
Me neither.
But we do have we got Flashpoint coming up, right?
Yeah.
And Flashpoint, the whole impetus of Flashpoint is changing the timeline. You start in one and you make the change, and then all of a sudden everything changed around in DC Universe. One of the many times that they just changed the timeline and they had the vision of doing something new. That time they were limiting all the DC Earth to just 52 DC Earths. They've since undone that multiple times, redone it, undone it, redone it, undone it. So we're at a point where we're at Infinite Universe, and all the stories that have ever happened, they exist. You have Michael Eidson is mentioning right here, Gotham by Gaslight is a great
so good.
Something like that.
The first Elseworlds book, actually, Gotham by Gaslight was the first book to carry that Elseworlds tag on. I believe it was applied retroactively. But if you've never read Gotham by Gaslight, it's basically Batman versus Jack the Ripper. It's not basically, it is Batman versus Jack the Ripper. It's an awesome story. I can't say enough good things about it. Kingdom Come, one of my personal favorite pieces of fiction is an Elseworlds story. So there's some really good Elseworlds. And again,
that is probably one of the most special Elseworlds stories that
is
one in there.
It's really good.
The mythology aspect of it. It's something that I truly expect to be made into a cinematic piece down the line for the DC universe.
That would be,
quite honestly, because there are very few events that they can all roads lead to Rome when it comes to DC cataclysmic events. That one just would work very well on many levels. So
it would. It's and we won't get into this isn't a Kingdom Come pod. We won't get into the continuity and minutia of that, but that would be good. Like in DC, there is no like super clean Infinity Gauntlet type story to kind of lean into. Salty Scott, my buddy Regular Scott, from The Wrap, says the Flash is going to be a hard reset. It could be. Peter, did you see Peter Gunn? Now you got me calling him Peter Gunn. Peter Safran, thank you, said that the Flash is one of the best superhero movies he's ever seen today.
Okay, I'm gonna slow the roll. There's a lot of talk that comes out of Warner Brothers Discovery about the quality of their superhero films, and they've no longer have the ability to tell us that their movies are good. There has to be proof in the product.
They had no problem telling us Batgirl was the worst thing that's ever been made. They talk about this thing like it was absolute trash, which makes me want to see it even more, to be quite honest with you.
I do think that it will see the light of day somehow, some way. I do not believe that thing has been scrubbed from the face of the earth.
No, I don't think. No. Nothing is scrubbed, especially in Hollywood. People like freaking Zack Snyder was running around with a hard drive with his Justice League movie on it for like 3 years, and nobody.
That's normal behavior.
That's something rational people do. But yeah, so nothing truly gets deleted. So I want to, at some point, they'll put something on HBO Max and be like, Elseworlds, bad movie. Come see this, and I don't know, maybe they'll put Joel Hodgson and the robots at the bottom of the screen.
All right, so we're on board that this is good.
Yes. This in theory, this is good. And, before the show, you and I talked about how we both feel there's a little fatigue in Marvel. And I totally feel that. 2021, like when when they launched WandaVision, I was so into these things. I was like, this is great. I want Falcon Winter Soldier. Like, it's good. It's good. It's not as great, but it's good. And Loki it's all right. It's good. And now I'm totally checked out. Like I'm absolutely checked out on the Marvel shows. The movies I'm still good with, but Kang
I still haven't seen Eternals. And
Me neither.
I don't think that there's any necessity to see it.
I agree with you. I haven't seen it.
And I will eventually. I have Black Panther 2. It's going to be out tomorrow on Disney Plus. I'm probably going to watch it when I get a chance to with my wife. But it's like the urgency. Like, I got to go see these movies. Has definitely diluted because of the outpouring of product.
There's
like,
so
you get your fill.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a give and there's a take on that. But now that there is a viable second option, you're kind of looking at that other restaurant around the corner. You're like, wonder what's on that menu. You're just
that's the thing is like I love Chipotle. It's my favorite. I have celiac. So there's not many places I can go out to eat. But I mean, all we know is I better get some dick. You stole that joke from me. I made that joke in our Brace for Impact group, and Scott's stealing my humor, which I appreciate.
Wow.
So he is the world's biggest. Scott is the world's biggest Dick Grayson fan, or the world's only Dick Grayson fan. Take that for what you will.
I am a huge Dick Grayson fan.
I am too, but no one likes
when Scott does the whole Dick Grayson thing.
Nobody likes Dick Grayson the way Scott likes Dick Grayson. It's a little uncomfortable.
Okay.
No, like I was saying, I think that I love Chipotle, but I don't want to have it every day. And it's nice to have like a change. And what I like about this announcement today is I was fully expecting Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman, heavy hitters, and they did not give us that. They gave us some variety, and I think that's the most interesting. Jeremy, what got announced today?
All right, so let's start with the big one, the new Superman. And so that is the image that was brought with us when they announced Superman Legacy, which should be coming out in July of 2025. Now, there was a quote about this movie that gives me incredible optimism, and it was from Peter Safran. And he said that Superman represents truth, justice, and the American way. He is kindness in a world that thinks of kindness as old-fashioned. That is it.
That's Superman.
That is 100% Superman.
That is 100% the character that I've been pleading for the last decade, because while I thought Henry Cavill was great choice in casting, he looks and he's got the pathos and he could have been a great Superman. Zack Snyder and David Goyer just didn't understand the character, and
they didn't even have the right color palette for the whole thing.
They didn't even have a color palette for the thing. The entire thing was desaturated.
Like, you have to look at this image right here, and you know that Superman belongs in the light. His color, like, he needs to reflect the light of like humanity. It's a fundamental thing about it.
Superman is what we should be.
Yes.
Right. Superman represent there's that whole cliche of there's two wolves. It's what wolf I feed. Superman is one wolf. Batman is the other wolf. Right. Superman is what we would like to be, how we would like to think of ourselves. We're kind. We're just. We do the right thing because it's the right thing. Batman is our guttural sense. Batman is the part of us that is angry, that feels oppressed, that feels like we've been wronged and spited. But we're gonna lash out, but we're not gonna do it in a cold, calculated way. We're gonna think about it, right. So those are the yin and the yang of mankind are reflected in these two titans of DC Comics.
Even more so, Superman represents the strength that comes from within with your emotions and your empathy, whereas Batman is the representative of the physical strength and the strength of determination when both dual sides of humanity, because the humanity that Superman has comes from growing with the kids.
Whereas Batman's lack of humanity comes from, of course, it's a cliche, the loss of his parents, right?
I hope we get a chance to see that again.
Oh, I'm sure we'll get another murder, because what's a Batman movie without watching his parents get it?
Sure.
That being said, my dog just walked in. That being said, we are getting a Batman movie. We're getting The Brave and the Bold, which is a Batman title, which has, tons and tons of Legacy. There you go. Like Superman Legacy, by the way, is the title. This is going to Brave and the Bold is a Batman team up. What I like about this title is we're teaming Batman with Robin, but we're not just getting Robin, we're getting Damian Wayne. And this is the first chance that regular people are going to get to see Bruce Wayne's son. For the normal people, I'll break this down. Batman and Talia al Ghul had a child, depending on which story you read. It was either in A Night of Passion or it was a
science experiment
gone well, done by Ra's al Ghul to create the perfect heir. And that is Damian. Damian was trained by the League of Shadows, the League of Assassins, to be the perfect killer. And then he comes to find his father, and he is everything Batman is not. He's basically imagine if Bruce Wayne, after the death of his parents, was raised by Ra's al Ghul. That is what Damian Wayne would be. And when they first introduced him in 2006, he was a stone cold killer, basically just a foil to Tim Drake, the Robin at the time. And then he really blossomed into something else. And the character of Damian became a psycho kid who wants to be better, right? Who's fighting his programming to be a better person as a kid. And he's been Robin for probably 14 years or so now, since about 2009, I want to say. And that's the Batman and Robin we're going to get. We're going to get Batman, Bruce Wayne, and his psycho son. And we've never seen this in any interpretation, like a screen interpretation before. I'm super stoked. Mike Edison says, I'm hoping the Brave and the Bold will have Batman, Robin teaming up with various heroes from the DCU. But that'd be a lot of fun, actually.
Yeah,
if we got to see some. Here's what I think is interesting. Oh, Salty Scott again. How cool would it be if Dick Grayson's Batman, like Grant Morrison? I'm glad you said that. Yeah, I'm really glad you brought this up, because what I've seen from specifically the Batman and the Superman that they've talked about is influences in Grant Morrison. Mm-hmm. The image that you used was was from Frank Quitely and Grant Morrison's All-Star Superman, largely considered one of the best Superman stories of the modern era. Right.
I gotta agree with you here. They also, one of the things that they're doing is they're featuring the extended Bat family. So when Scott says we might get, Dick Grayson as Batman, that's entirely reality, because they want to show that there is a Jason Todd, a Dick Grayson, a Tim Drake, that there were Robins before Damian that were better in different ways, but Damian is probably the best of them all compositely in some weird, I can't explain it other than when you see Damian, you know that he's Batman's son. And as such, it's mind-blowing how they've managed to translate that popularity. He might be my favorite. It's between him and Dick Grayson. I think I just like Dick Grayson as a character as a whole, but as a Robin, I think Damian Wayne is my favorite Robin.
I think Dick Grayson.
I hope we get to see all these Robins.
Me too. We might. I think Dick Grayson works better as Nightwing than as Robin today. Like, Dick Grayson's a better Robin. Tim Drake's a good Robin. I really like the dynamic between Tim Drake and Damian. I love the dynamic with Damian and Dick Grayson.
That's what I'm hoping we see. The Batman, like a moment maybe within the movie where Dick has to wear the costume and he's training Damian inside the.
What I liked is they said they were taking Grant Morrison's run, because Grant Morrison's run on Batman, which goes from about late 2006 to about 2011, was one of my favorite runs in comics. Like Batman R.I.P. and everything that led into it was just this great interpretation of Batman. You got away from the Bat God character a little bit, and we started just telling really good Batman stories that were kind of different. He helped create a different rogues gallery for him. He helped kind of refine the character sounds cheesy, but kind of in the 21st century. So I like that he
made Batman cool again.
He really did. Like, Batman R.I.P. is a good story. Adding Damian was cool. Batman Incorporated with all the Batman of many nations is really cool, because like Batman established that there's a Batman everywhere, and they're different, but they're all inspired by Batman.
So we got to make clear to people that when Grant Morrison writes a story, this guy is insane. And the fact that they're doing these stories based on what he does, it means that they're swinging hard on these movies. One of the things that happens in the Morrison run is Batman dies.
Mhm.
He literally dies, and he is sent, and his body gets sent through time, and he goes inward towards his timeline as Batman, as he's slowly remembering, but he's traveling through time. He's fighting cavemen. He's in like Puritan, like Northeastern America before it's America. It's all these different things that are happening.
He's a
And
noir
then
detective.
And then when he gets there, he's strapped with like a time bomb as he's going through time that's going to destroy his entire existence. And you're just like, what is happening here? And then you watch it, and then they have the resolution, and you're totally fine with it. Like you get from point A to point B, it all makes sense. But if you're wanting a comic book that you've never understood, like that will completely destroy your perception of what comics can be, you need to read the Morrison Batman run.
I mean, Grant Morrison is a person who, I don't want to say claims they've met aliens, but may have actually met aliens. Like they exist on a different level. Like this is the person who created Animal Man, who had a fight with God, and God was Grant Morrison. He was the writer. Yeah. Like he does this weird metaphysical stuff, and then he can do this like stripped down, simple version of Superman. Right? They have this amazing ability to be wild and bombastic and then bring it back down to the core elements of what it is. And this is what I like for this. If they keep saying we're doing what Grant Morrison is our influence, that is exactly what the DC universe should be. It should be the gods and the people and how they can interact together. And I like that they're calling this whole thing gods and monsters. If anybody would make me believe in magic, it's Morrison. Yeah, I agree with you.
100%.
Yeah. Like if they explained it to me, I'd be like, okay, I get it. Like, so I like this. I like they're calling this whole wave of things gods and monsters, and they're doing these big tentpole things like Superman and Batman, and they're also going to boil it down a little bit. We've got a Creature Commandos animated series. Jeremy, are you familiar with the Creature Commandos?
I'm familiar with the characters of the Creature Commandos, but I'm not familiar with the Creature Commandos in and of itself.
I know about them a little bit, created by J.M. DeMatteis. I know Frankenstein because he was a big character in Morrison's Seven Soldiers of Victory. Frankenstein.
I know Rick Flag. I know Dr. Phosphorus. I know Frankenstein. I know Lady Frankenstein. I know Weasel from the Suicide Squad movie.
Yes.
I mean, there are a few I'm a gapping on.
So in the
Nina
comics,
Magursky is a very, very random character to invoke, but it makes perfect sense.
Excuse me. I think like in the comics, these are characters that were brought together. These monsters are brought together to fight in World War II. So I'm very curious to see how they implement the Creature Commandos in this world. I assume it's going to be some type of offshoot of the Suicide Squad based on the fact that we have Flag and Weasel. Right?
Weasel could dead give away that this is going to have a lot of humor in it.
Yes, which is good because again, I don't know how much humor. I think we're gonna get some lightness because again, it's Gunn. Gunn does a great job of balancing light with darkness. He's not afraid to be funny while at the same time generating lots of pathos for his characters. Like the Guardians movie is a great example of that, of like what he can do. And this just based on this little bit of promotional artwork they've released, it kind of sets the tone. It looks fun. I'm very excited. And speaking of Suicide Squad, Waller.
Yeah, we got Waller. She's a mean one.
Yes, she is. And it seems like this is where things get interesting. They're pausing Peacemaker. Again, we're a wrestling podcast network. John Cena, everyone liked Peacemaker. This seems to take place between seasons 1 and 2 of Peacemaker, and it looks like the side characters from Peacemaker are going to pick up the threads, I should say, that were left at the end of season 1 Peacemaker when Amanda Waller gets outed for what she is. Amanda Waller is the character in the DC universe, kind of the puppet master, the person who pulls the strings behind the scenes. Evil Nick Fury, if you will. Right?
Played by Viola Davis.
Played quite well by Viola Davis.
Returning to the role.
Yeah, and this is what's interesting is because she was Waller in the first Suicide Squad movie, which was ass, and she was also Waller in the second I can't say this word today. The second Suicide Squad movie, which was not ass, which was actually pretty entertaining, and she was in Peacemaker, which was good. And Scott says it might be all about her daughter. That's entirely possible.
Yeah.
But it's saying starring Viola Davis. I imagine they're going to deal with it. What's interesting to me is this is picking up the pieces of something that's firmly established in what Snyder did. Because that last season or last episode of Peacemaker, we see Jason Momoa's Aquaman and Ezra Miller's Flash right there. So this just leads me to wonder what exactly is going to happen in the Flash movie. Because we're getting a different Superman. They told us we're not going to get Henry Cavill as Superman. We're not getting Ben Affleck as Batman. We're getting something different. How do we get there? These two projects make me wonder how this is possible.
I think it's a testament that they're getting Viola Davis back, because right now there's only one Waller that you can have to play Amanda Waller, and that's Davis. How they're doing it, besides Flashpoint, I have no doubt that she could probably be involved in some kind of machination and get herself in and out of the timeline. It's not out of the realm of possibility, but I would just chalk it up probably to, her remaining a constant despite all the heroes around her changing their look and image and all that stuff, because, Waller's like Darkseid. Waller is. I wonder.
There's a character in the First Crisis called the Psycho Pirate who remembers what the timeline and the universes were like before the Infinitus collapsed upon themselves.
Is that because of the mask?
It's because of the Medusa mask. Now we're getting super nerdy here, but yeah, the Medusa mask allowed the Psycho Pirate to remember the previous universe, which also gave them an out if it didn't work back in the day. So I wonder if in some way this version of Waller isn't going to exist in that same kind of fashion where she kind of remembers what things are like beforehand. Again, speculation on my part. I have no idea.
Well, another way that we could find out about how this timeline all changes is perhaps with Booster Gold.
Nice segue. Booster Gold. If you are a fan of DC, a longtime fan, this is a character that has your heartstrings. If you don't get, I will lay this out.
Booster.
Booster Gold is a regular dude from the future who uses technology that is every day. I think it's 500 years in the future, travels back in time to become a superhero. They coined him back as basically human imposter syndrome.
Yep.
And he is one of the funniest damn characters in the DCU, which again, seeing that we're doing a Booster Gold series tells me we're not just going to be in the ho-hum doldrab, everything is so serious Snyderverse anymore. Booster Gold is a lot of fun. And to have a show like this, lets me know that not everything is going to be super serious. We're going to have some lighthearted moments too.
Do you think we'll get like the Legion? Do you think that they'll go to like Jonah Hex's time? Is this all across the board?
I don't know. We had that with the Legends of Tomorrow show, right? Which brought Booster
underrated show, by the way.
Completely underrated show. It was a little much for me at times, to be honest with you. A little much.
So that's why it was underrated.
I would like to see them save the Legion and do that separately. Like, let's get this going first, because I think the Legion is the most underutilized concept in the DC universe. The Legion of Superheroes is basically Teen Titans in the 31st century. With Superboy. So we're going to leave that. Yeah, we'll leave that kind of alone for now. We won't get too much into that. But I think with having a Booster Gold character, it gives you a lot of flexibility. And like you said, because we're dealing with an alternate timeline, perhaps using Booster is a good way to kind of mitigate that. And kind of
you could flat out have Booster just fuck up the timeline.
Which would actually make a whole lot of sense for the character, because he kind of does frequently. So that is, and he's fun too. And we're getting a Blue Beetle movie this year.
Not the Blue Beetle that is called,
but we don't know
with him.
But I imagine they're going to retroactively do that, though.
I hope that they manage to bring the characters of Blue Beetle, Ted Kord, and Michael Carter, Booster Gold together, because as a pair in comics and in screen, they are the finest two knuckleheads that you'll have as superheroes teaming up with each other.
It's like the greatest bromance in comic history is the blue and the gold. It's fantastic. Like, the chemistry between the two characters is awesome. And I do hope we get into that a little bit.
They're almost the R2 and
C3PO.
In the DCU universe.
That's a great way to describe it. Actually, in color schemes too.
Yeah.
But it's not all sunshine and roses in this new DC universe.
Ooh, we got darkness.
We do have some darkness, including possibly my favorite property in all of DC Comics. We have the Swamp Thing returning. Now, we talked about Grant Morrison. You can't talk about DC Comics or the Swamp Thing without mentioning Alan Moore. Alan Moore in the early 80s revitalized this largely forgotten semi-horror character and turned it into one of the seminal works of the 1980s. The Alan Moore run, continued by Rick Veitch and throughout the 80s on Swamp Thing, is just great writing and amazing visual storytelling. It's a character who I don't know if they're going to go with the human turned into the muck monster or the muck monster who is actually an avatar of planet Earth. It's awesome.
I will, okay, if it ends up not being in the Alan Moore iteration and more of the Jeff Lemire, Scott Snyder iteration with the green and the red, the green being Swamp Thing is the flora, and the red is the virus that is taking over and destroying all the things. That might also, the fauna, I think it was the fauna, but I didn't want to say it for sure. That could also be a horror element that they could do, because they did a Swamp Thing special on HBO Max a few years ago that went away really, really quickly. They've also done a Swamp Thing movie in the past before. So there is a little bit of familiarity, but is that familiarity a benefit or a hindrance to the property now?
I think it's a benefit because it gives people a touchstone that this character does exist, right? And the show is actually pretty decent. And by the way, the green created by Alan Moore, the red created by Grant Morrison.
There it is.
So that Vertigo wave of British writers from the 1980s left such an indelible footprint on these comics, right? And this universe and like these properties that I used to watch the old Swamp Thing TV. Me too, with Dick DeRock that was on USA Today.
I remember that.
Don't bring your evil here. I love that show. I absolutely love that show. Swamp Thing rules. And it's going to be, they've said this is straight up going to be horror. Right. And which is good. That's some of the best Swamp Thing stuff is when it delves into the horror. Lemire wrote some great Animal Man, because the Animal Man is kind of the opposite. Like Swamp Thing is this, Animal Man would be under Jeff Lemire, like you said, was doing very similar stories with the animals as opposed to the vegetation.
The carcasses, the death of animals was used. So you mentioned British writers, and so we have another British writer whose property is being featured, and that is The Authority. This is weird. I just want to stop real quick before we do this. So the writer of this property is named Warren Ellis, and there are a number of criticisms levied against him about his behavior in the comics industry. So I'm going to share this website with you, and if you want to know more, I'm going to mention it, and then we will move on. The website is somanyofus.com. If you want to know more about what has happened with Warren Ellis in the past, I urge you to go check that out. Otherwise, we are going to continue and talk about The Authority as the movie property.
What's wild about The Authority is it's not... I talked earlier about how DC Comics was a universe that's been cobbled together, and like a virus, it just kind of absorbs other comic companies. And in the early 2000s, it did that with Jim Lee's Wildstorm universe. Jim Lee, if you're an X-Men fan from the 90s, he was probably the most famous X-Men artist ever. He's currently the publisher on DC Comics. He's DC Comics publisher. He had his own company that was part of Image called Wildstorm, and DC bought it and brought Jim Lee with him. And this was kind of wasn't always the linchpin book. Wildcats would have been the linchpin book, but by the time the sale happened, The Authority was the linchpin title.
This was the change. This was an industry-changing book back in 2000, 2001, 2002.
Yeah, what's weird about this book, though, is it's basically a Justice League parable featuring pastiche characters that are...
The gloves were off.
Yeah. Here's why I find this weird is we've got that already with The Boys, Right, and the Boys is a total takeoff on the Authority. Like the Authority came way before the Boys and all that kind of stuff. Like anything that people think as being superheroes aren't for kids anymore really kind of came from this. So part of me is surprised because I almost feel like the Boys has kind of worn out that trope right now, and the Authority has never really been a popular comic since being brought into DC, because it's like, why have the Justice League homage team when you actually have the Justice League? So them doing this is wild to me, man. I was blown away by this announcement more than any of them.
I just felt like when they came out with this was so that they could do Justice League stories and have consequences, because you can't take the characters away in the Justice League. If you killed any one of these characters or created like a relationship between the audience and the character in this movie, and then you killed them, it'd be like what, Serenity or a couple others, like One and Done, where you have a character, you lose it. Honestly, the Jenny Sparks character is primed for death. Like the whole deal is that she dies over and over again. She's the spirit of the century. We also have a Batman and Superman iteration with Apollo and Midnighter. And I've seen this, and I'm going to credit a few people I've seen on here. It would amuse me to no end if they did an Authority movie and they cast Henry Cavill and Ben Affleck as Apollo and Midnighter as gay lovers.
That's what it is. Apollo and Midnighter are essentially I don't say it's a joke, but it's essentially a take on what if Batman and Superman were gay. That's basically Apollo and Midnighter. And like I said, to do that in a universe where you have Batman, is this who has
Apollo and Midnighter is in the Authority. Yes.
Yeah. And again, Scott's a big DC fan, but the Authority has never really had quite the reach in the DC. I remember in the DC regular the DC proper. I remember when they tried the New 52 relaunch about 12 years ago in 2011, they tried to make Grifter, who's a character from Wildcats, they tried to make him more. Yeah, and it didn't quite work.
Gen 13.
Gen 13 didn't quite work. Like those Wildstorm titles that were cool indie titles, just
product of the generation.
Click. It really is. It's a product of like our teen years, quite frankly. And it's just, this is the one property that I'm like, really? Especially because I think that there's a better Warren Ellis property out there. Are you familiar with? Oh my God, I just drew a blank on the other one.
Planetary.
Thank you. Planetary. It's only a 26 issue series. It's John Cassidy and Warren Ellis, and it's I think that's the better book.
It starts great, but it limps to the finish line.
You think so? I like the finish, but the start is better.
It limped a little bit, but if you want to see this writer do his take on darker, more contemporary versions of characters that you are familiar with, maybe from China in the 30s or 40s Nazis, and play up some of the tropes, science fiction, incorporated into modern superheroes. That's the kind of book that Planetary was.
Yeah, I mean, like it's a very interesting character. I mean, like it's that is a shame, because maybe we will get that. This gives me hope that we will, because I think the Planetary is more streamlined series than Authority. That would
be a good TV show, like it would 1-2 season with Elijah Snow and a couple of the other characters. The drummer. It's again, we won't get into that, but again, this gives me hope for what this can be. Like this is the weird of all the properties. This is the Guardians of the Galaxy of the.
Yeah, you're right. This is James
of the thing. This is the passion project.
This is James Gunn saying I can make weird stuff work that you don't think would work. Because again, the Guardians didn't have a successful run until after the movie came out.
So if you want a quick tagline to describe the Authority movie, it is probably going to be the Justice League getting shot up with Fast and the Furious.
Yeah. This is the comic that created what we call widescreen comics, which was big in the 2000s, which the panels were huge and everything was to look like an action movie, right? More so than, I don't want to say story-driven stuff, but they had a different look to them. Like Marvel's Ultimates and stuff were influenced specifically by the Authority. Whereas this one is, this is actually Paradise Lost. I'm sorry.
This is the new one that we're going to go to.
Yeah.
Paradise Lost.
This one's weird too. What do you think about this one? This is the history of Themyscira.
This is the Game of Thrones.
Yeah, that's exactly what this is.
This is the Game of Thrones, like This is their Lord of the Rings. This is their sprawling historical epic that's gonna define how Themyscira defined itself away from the Greek gods and became independent island, respecting what Athena, Hera, and all the other female Greek gods on Olympus.
Yeah, no, you're right. This is what happened before Wonder Woman.
She will not be in this show.
No, nor should
she won't even be born or clade or
Clade
whatever or birth from Zeus. Apparently, is the new thing.
Yeah, I don't know how this one is going to be. I think this one, because again, if you channel like House of the Dragon, right? This is essentially going to be this universe's House of the Dragon. Which I mean by that is you take something super successful like Game of Thrones and you do the prequel to it. And as long as the characters are engaging, you can have your own story and it's familiar enough. You're going to be into this. Like this is really going to come down to casting and what the story is, because we really don't like. There has been a comic of this, but again, it's not like it was super popular. It's not like it was like, oh my god, the history of Themyscira book is amazing. This is going to be one of those little bit more offbeat projects. What do you think about this one?
I think it has a lot of promise. I'm curious on the casting because it's going to be like 90% women, 95% women, because the whole thing is it's an island of women. So I'm curious how they're going to go about with, is this going to be that liberation? Is it going to be, the walls are closing in after we've been independent for a while? We haven't quite steeled ourselves. Is it like the gods are coming to our aid? Or, there's a whole lot here that I'm just like, that's an open core. Like there's an open landscape here that they can play around with. What if Michael Eidson? Greek myth. It absolutely is. And Kelly Sue DeConnick actually has a Wonder Woman Historia book that had just come out that I think is probably going to draw a lot. They're going to draw a lot from the recent work that Wonder Woman has that they are drawing on post the Patty Jenkins Wonder Woman 1 and 2, because there was definitely a shift in the content that DC Publishing had post those movies. And so I definitely think that the audience is here for, I guess, Paradise Lost.
It's going to be interesting. This is the one property that I'm like, I don't know what to think about. Like, I know Authority was kind of like, okay, this is offbeat. I kind of get this. This is the one I'm like, really? This one? Like, it feels like this to me is like they're keeping the Wonder Woman property warm while they figure out what to do with Gal Gadot.
Is she done?
We don't know.
Yeah, okay.
Nothing's official. Like
nothing's official till it's official.
Yeah, but then they kind of invited them back. They invited everybody but them back.
Henry and Affleck, or just Captain?
Henry and Affleck, yeah, they're the ones.
Huh.
Yeah.
That is very interesting, but I think just give it some time and all this will eliminate itself.
I do too. It's gonna be interesting to see where it kind of plays out.
But you know what? Eliminate.
What's that?
Lantern.
Now this is the one. This is going to be an HBO Max series, and I'm excited as hell for this because the Green Lantern movie is one of the greatest cinematic crimes to ever befall us. Like, it's so crazy.
It was pretty rough.
It's terrible. The stuff that made Jeff Johns a really good comic writer makes him very not good at actually the film adaptation stuff, because there's so much going on in that, and none of it was good. This time we're taking a very simple story. They compared this to True Detective, which is where I think this is really interesting, because we're going to get essentially what the Green Lanterns are. Yes, Scott's right about time we get John Stewart. They're space cops, right? The Lantern Ring is essentially a badge, and you patrol your sector, right? And every sector has two. And here we have John Stewart and Hal Jordan, the two most recognizable Green Lanterns. And it sounds like they're solving a crime or a murder mystery or something like that. That's going to be kind of overarching through this new DCU.
True Detective style.
Yeah, that has me really excited.
JD, have you ever seen The Expanse?
No, I have not, actually.
Okay, so they have a representation of space that is dark and grimy and scary and lonely when you are out there. And if they can do that kind of representation of being in space as a Green Lantern, I think they're going to be well on their way with a fantastic iteration of this, because they're doing a series. I imagine we're going to have more than one ring. We have what, 9 ring colors right now, but if they do anything, we might have a yellow ring involved somewhere in all this. That wouldn't complicate things too much. But what do you think? How far down the thread do they pull on Green Lantern mythology in this TV show?
I mean, they can go deep, right? They can do the Blackest Night stuff. They can go a little bit more simple. I don't know where they want to go with this. If it were me, I would kind of steer into Blackest Night kind of thing, because I'm all about, that's my favorite Green Lantern story. But I think they might want to try to do something different, right? Like almost like Darwin Cook did in The New Frontier, where you're using that like almost Lovecraftian cosmic horror force. And I think the Lanterns are a great vehicle with which to explore that.
What if, because you mentioned Blackest Night, what if this thread pull of a murder mystery led to the Sinestro Corps War?
It'd be great for me.
You know what I mean?
I would love it.
An assassination plot revealed like a plot that leads to all-out war between the Yellow Lanterns and the Green Lanterns over a course of a few seasons of this show.
Sign me up, because
if that was the plan, then they have hit the jackpot.
I always thought the first Green Lantern movie should have been akin to Training Day, right? It should have been Hal Jordan training Sinestro training Hal Jordan after he got his ring, and then Hal discovers how corrupt Sinestro is, right? That's what it should have been. This is a different take than that, but this is in the similar vein of like, we're going to treat this not just like a space opera, but we're going to treat it like cop story. And I think that's what's going to make this work. I like a lot like the Robins. I think the variety of personalities of the Lanterns work, so let them bounce off each other. I agree, and that's part of the fun of reading the Green Lantern comics, is the different Lanterns and how they work with each other, especially the Earthbound Lanterns, because all 4 of them are interesting and all 4 of them are super different.
Okay, let's explain that real quick. So the Green Lantern Corps have 3,600 members?
7,200.
7,200 members now. So, and they patrol different sectors of space. Earth sector is 2814.
Correct.
They have at least 4 lanterns right now, probably like 8 or 9. The way that I can't keep track of them, but these 2 are the ones that they're going to be focused on as Earth. But the number of various extraterrestrial lanterns that you see on the show, I hope that they really play into that.
I do too, because there's a lot of stuff you can use, a lot you can play with, especially if it's going to be more of a terrestrial story, right? If they're not going to go to Oa, if we're not going to get into the Guardians and Kilowog and all that, let's just make this really interesting with John and Hal. Let's maybe meet Kyle and Guy if possible, the other 2 major Earth Lanterns, and let's really explore what the Green Lantern Corps is about, and using that the same way like we have this knowledge of the police force to tell a story about True Detective. I like the idea of True Detective because True Detective was very much a cosmic horror story, right?
Peel back.
Yet it was very, very much that. It was like at the end, some people were lost at the end, but I mean, like, if you're a fan of that kind of stuff, if you're a fan of like Lovecraft and all those kind of things, you can kind of see where they were going the entire time. Totally. And so you're not surprised when you get this giant cosmic entity at the end. I think that could work a lot easier with, Green Lanterns and regular cops. But I love the touchstone that they're using for it. I think using True Detective as kind of a base platform to jump off of makes this super interesting, and it gives it something different than just another superhero story.
Alien and Aliens and that whole franchise has proven that space horror is viable. And if they can't make space horror work with Green Lantern, then, well, you should find somebody else that can't, because it's entirely possible. So we have one last property, and this one is what I'm going to call the wild card property.
Supergirl in the World of Tomorrow. No, Tom King, the comic writer that did this, is directly involved in this adaptation. And I'll be honest with you, I never read this book. So
I did not either.
Don't know much about it. curious to see what they do with it. But he said this is the term they used was hardcore, and like wrestling fans, that makes me think Supergirl's going to gig her head up all the time and just bleed. But just Kryptonians can't do that. So I don't know what they're going to do with this. I really don't, and I don't know how to read into that.
Did you watch the video?
I did not watch the video. I just read transcripts.
So he explained it pretty thoroughly that he just, whereas Superman was born into the kindness and the sun,
right?
She was born into a life of trauma. Everyone around her is dead. All her family, like this life of Krypton. Krypton's gone. She might be on Argo City, which is a shrunken city, in which everybody's dying because they have nowhere to go, and it's like not as sustainable as you might think. So there is a legacy in Superman of weird science fiction shit.
Yeah.
And if you can't do that with Superman, then do it with Supergirl. And I think that's the idea, is that they're going to just put all the weird stuff that you see in all the different Superman things where, you know, magic affects him. Magic would affect her. You know, you see swords, you see like this image right here tells you that anything is on the table. You know, as much as Authority was the Guardians of the Galaxy like passion project, this appears to be the Guardians of the Galaxy creatively. Like you're gonna see all like the weird plants, the animals, and the off the wall like creations and character designs that you're not gonna see anywhere else. So this is like, I feel, a cut loose project. What about
this? This is interesting. Like, I love the character of Superman because he's a baby when Krypton is destroyed. Like, everything he knows about his home planet is stuff he read or was taught. Kara Zor-El is a teacher. Kara Zor-El is a child when this happened. She's a teenager. She knows Krypton. She remembers it. She watched her world be destroyed and carries that trauma with her, right? As long as Michael Edison, as long as Supergirl movie isn't too bleak, I'm on board. I don't think it's going to be bleak because I'm like, Tom King can get bleak with stuff, but he's also very hopeful and he's also very thought-provoking with his stuff. Like, if you read
Discovery of Hope seemed like an overlying arc.
Mr. Miracle
is
big time.
Want to do.
Yeah, that was definitely his Mr. Miracle run. And I'm going to assume that would be something similar to that on Supergirl. So just his involvement alone is enough to give me I'm intrigued.
Absolutely.
Yeah. What I like about this is we didn't just go heavy hitters. We didn't get Wonder Woman, Superman, Batman, Shazam. You know, they didn't just go one, other, boom, boom. They threw some curveballs at you. And not just one or two curveballs, a lot of curveballs, a lot of choices that I'm surprised they made. I didn't think we were gonna get a Creature Commandos TV show. I didn't think we would get this type of a Supergirl. Like, I don't know what to think. I also don't know if this is gonna, because we have a Supergirl in the Flash movie. I don't know if this is gonna be the same Supergirl or not.
No, this does not feel like it's gonna be anything.
Yeah.
I think the Supergirl show that was on the CW did a lot to give awareness to the general public that this character exists. But now that it exists, and you know that, like, oh, there's a Supergirl, you can just kind of go to the races with it and just kind of like, okay, you know the basics. Just like Batman's parents died in an alley, blam bam, died, pearl necklace. He cried, became Batman. Like, now you know Superman has a cousin. She's a girl. She has the same powers. You're off to the races.
I like that about all these movies. None of these seem to be origin stories.
Yeah.
It all seems to be like, you know who these guys are, go. We all know Superman, where he came from. We all know where Batman came from. Run. Which is different. That's good, because I think that Marvel has really drained us of watching this. Because again, they basically made the same movie 6 or 7 times. Like, their origin movies are all pretty much the same, and they're good. They're well done. I have no problem with them. But Doctor Strange and Iron Man are the exact same movie.
Yeah,
it's the same.
All
movie.
right, so I got one question for us to wrap this up.
Let's do this.
And it is from Eidson. Question for you guys: who should be the big bad of this 8 to 10 year plan? I was thinking Darkseid, but maybe that's already been done with the Snyder stuff. Would you like to see Brainiac or Luthor be it?
Well, it's funny. Dave Bautista today came out and said he wants to play Luthor, and I like that idea. I think him and Gunn have a previous relationship from the Guardians movies that I think could play off of well. Bautista is actually a pretty good actor, and like, if you saw him in like Blade Runner, like, he does characters really well. I think that he would be a very interesting interpretation of Lex Luthor. I don't think the idea of a big ripped up Luthor is crazy, because I think he would be crazy enough to try to get as muscular as Superman.
Mhm.
I think that his ego, I think that fits with Lex Luthor's ego. So I am on board for Lex Luthor. But let me say this. Some of my favorite older Superman stories involve the team up of Luthor and Brainiac. Why not both?
My favorite story of all time had Whatever Happened to the Man of
Man of
Tomorrow.
Tomorrow. Alan
And
Moore. Yeah.
Alan Moore, where all these stories happened, and maybe they didn't, you know.
Uh-huh.
I am a bit disappointed that Darkseid was used because I feel like he is the obvious choice to wrap like a Thanos level epic 10-year run around.
It's too obvious.
Too obvious.
Yeah.
If you did Brainiac, I think Brainiac is probably like the Blowfield to the entire DC universe, where he could
yes.
just exist and go back and forth between all these movies and have like fingers and machinations or tentacles or cables and machinations here, there, everywhere. I think those are the three options. I don't think you can really do anything like the Anti-Monitor because it's too tied to Crisis, and they've kind of got it's not there. We're not there, and stuff like Kingdom Come has different. Maybe Vandal Savage. You know, Vandal Savage is a time travel-y villain that
I could see Vandal Savage
could do that. So there are a few options there, but I think I'm kind of on it with one of those three being the guy.
I really love the Bruce Timm version of Brainiac, right? Because in the Bruce Timm animated universe, Brainiac was the computer system of Krypton that operated everything. And then when it was time, when he was done with Krypton, he allowed Krypton to be destroyed and moved on to other universes where he just collects information and destroys stuff. And he's an artificial intelligence.
He's the Borg.
Cool. He is. I never thought about that. You're 100% right. He is the Borg, but I like that version of him. Yeah. So I would really
he was the Borg before the Borg.
Yeah, I would really like to see that version of Brainiac, just the cold calculating, especially when artificial intelligence has become a much more commercial term, like especially this year in 2023. AI and what AI art specifically has done has really become a topic du jour. So I think by bringing in an AI character, you could really say a lot, especially Brainiac with what he does with capturing civilizations and cultures. There's so much, man. Now I want to write a story about that. There's so much you could say about what artificial intelligence is in 2023, as opposed to what we thought artificial intelligence was in 1954 or in 1987. You know, it means something much different today that still works for that Brainiac character. So I would like to see, I'm going to stand by my comments. I'm going to like to see that Brainiac Luthor combination be the overarching villains of this 8 to 10, whatever epic that were being laid out.
Yeah, between that and a green and purple power suit for Dave Bautista, just rocking throughout a bunch of movies.
So cool, man.
I'd be hard into it. Let's see, Michael Edson. Thank you for joining us, Michael. Scott, thank you for joining us. JD, socials.
You can find me at JD_Oliva on Twitter. I don't write anymore, but I do Brace for Impact on the Fight Game Media Podcast Network. It's Mike Gilbert and I talking about Impact Wrestling, and then our Patreon show, we kind of branch off into what's going on in all of pro wrestling. I co-host a show called Superhero Speak, where we talk more about these kind of topics. You can find that also on YouTube, and then where your finer podcasts are available.
You can find me here talking New Japan Pro Wrestling on the Fight Game Media channel for Speaking of Strong Style with Stephen Conway. Other than that, next time we got something to talk about, nerd shit, comic world, we'll be back here on Parallel Worlds, talking it all up all over again. JD, thanks for joining us. We will see you when we see you. Peace out.